A humble farmer named John stumbles upon a horse that carries a secret mark, a mysterious swirl on its hip that, according to his late grandfather Robert's tales, signals greatness. Though John's life had been devoted mostly to tending his crops, something about this unique animal pulls at him. His grandfather had often spoken of horses born with extra heart and spirit, and the swirl on this bay horse's sleek chestnut coat instantly sparks memories of long-ago summers and whispered family legends. John finds himself wandering through his small rural town's bustling outdoor market on a cool, refreshing day after a week of scorching heat. The sun hangs low, casting a warm, golden light over the scene, while the earthy aroma of hay and freshly baked goods mixes with a murmur of bartering. As he strolls among the vendors, adjusting the brim of his weathered hat and stirring up small clouds of dust with his scuffed boots, he is drawn not by the noise or routine commerce but by a quiet, almost magnetic scene at the edge of the market. Near the fringe where the crowd thins, John notices an elderly woman named Susan seated in a quiet corner. She sits on a simple folding stool with a frail, time-worn frame, her gentle hands resting on her knees. Beside her stands the horse, a bay animal tethered to a modest wooden post. Despite the routine nature of the market, the horse remains oddly calm, its hooves crunching softly on the dry earth. A handmade sign proclaims, "Horse for sale, $50, and although many passers-by dismiss it with murmurs about its low price, John is captivated not by the cost but by the horse's distinctive swirl, a tight, precise pattern etched above its hip, as if it were an emblem of destiny. As John steps closer, memories of his grandfather's impassioned words return. A swirl like that isn't mere decoration, it's a mark of greatness. Horses like these are born with an extra spark, a fire you can't teach. Once, he had brushed off those stories as old wives' tales, but now the swirl seems undeniable, a silent promise of something extraordinary. Susan's voice breaks through his reverie. With soft, steady tones and eyes that betray both sorrow and hope, she explains that the horse was once her husband's pride and joy, a companion she could no longer afford to keep after his passing last spring. He loved her dearly, she murmurs, her voice filled with quiet longing, but I must see her go to someone who'll truly care for her. John studies Susan's lined face, marked by years of hard work and tender loss, and sees in her the same quiet hope that his grandfather had admired. Despite never having been an avid horseman himself, John feels inexplicably drawn to this animal, a symbol of destiny that challenges his long-held skepticism. Hesitant but determined, he asks the price. "How much did you say?" he inquires softly. $50, Susan replies almost apologetically, though her eyes hold a wistful pride. Without fully understanding why, John reaches into his pocket, extracts a few crumpled bills, and offers them. In that moment, as he untethers the horse, a spark of something new and profound ignites within him. The horse, now destined to be called Swirl in honor of its mysterious mark, follows him with quiet obedience. As they make their way out of the market, the road home stretches ahead under a sky painted in the soft amber hues of evening. The gentle crunch of gravel under his truck's tires underscores a newfound stirring in John's heart, an awakening that hints at a journey of transformation not just for the horse, but for himself as well. For the first time in years, he feels that this unassuming encounter might lead him to a destiny far beyond the routine grind of farming, a legacy waiting to be written, inspired by memories, hope, and the undeniable mark of greatness. After bringing Swirl home, John's days take on a gentle new rhythm. Every morning, he makes it a point to tend to Swirl with quiet care. As he steps into the barn, John reaches out to brush the smooth yet coarse coat of Swirl, murmuring softly, "You're not so bad." In that moment, Swirl shifts her head slightly, her steady gaze meeting his, and John feels a subtle, unexpected spark of connection, a small, tender thread of understanding that begins to weave through his heart. Over the next several days, caring for Swirl becomes more than just a routine chore. Feeding her, cleaning her stall, and simply watching her move with a graceful calm fills John's mornings with a comforting presence he had long ignored. In the quiet of the barn, as John forks hay into her stall, he pauses to watch Swirl nibble slowly, her eyes soft and attentive. In a reflective whisper, John recalls the words his grandfather once spoke about horses with special marks. "My granddad would have liked you," he says, almost without realizing it. The memory of those old stories, about a swirl that signified greatness, stirs something deep within him as he studies the distinct mark on Swirl's hip. Soon, whispers of this unlikely new bond begin to ripple through the local community. One cool morning, while John is busy in the barn, a friend pulls up in a dusty truck. The friend greets him with a wide, teasing grin, remarking, "Well, John, Never thought I'd see you with a horse." John, ever modest, simply shrugs and gestures toward Swirl. That swirl on her hip. My granddad said it was a sign. Something special, something that sets her apart. His friend raises an eyebrow, half skeptical yet intrigued. "Maybe there's more to it than just a tale," he comments. Though John is unsure, the idea begins to take root in his mind. As days pass, the gentle routine grows into something more profound. John finds himself lingering in the barn long after his work is done, drawn to the quiet dignity in Swirl's eyes. One afternoon, while feeding her, he softly confesses, "I don't know why, but I feel like you're meant for something greater." Swirl, as if understanding every word, shifts her gaze knowingly and nuzzles his hand. The silent exchange between them speaks volumes. Here is a bond formed not just by necessity, but by destiny. Then comes the morning of the local race, a modest event held on a crisp autumn day. John, whose life had always been about the simple routines of farming, now faces a new challenge. Despite his initial hesitations and lack of experience as a horseman, a part of him is compelled by the stories of old and the quiet confidence he sees in Swirl. As he carefully brushes down her chestnut coat and adjusts the reins, the golden light of the morning casts long, hopeful shadows in the barn. John's heart pounds with a mix of nervousness and anticipation. At the small-town race grounds, the atmosphere buzzes with energy. While other riders prepare their horses for the short, dusty loop track, John leads Swirl with a calm resolve. The track, lined with local spectators and fellow farmers, becomes the stage for a quiet triumph. When the race begins, John leans close to Swirl as they surge forward together. The sound of pounding hooves, the rush of cool wind against his face, and the cheers from a modest crowd blend into a moment of pure, unspoken unity. Swirl's movements are smooth and powerful, each stride reflecting the legacy of greatness that John has come to believe might lie within her. Crossing the finish line, John stops with a small ribbon in hand, a token of victory that feels like the beginning of something new. In that moment, as he gently strokes Swirl's neck, John's doubts and old ways of living begin to fade. Though winning a local race might not change everything overnight, it ignites in him a deep curiosity and an emerging sense of purpose. Every morning, when he returns to the barn, he feels a lingering anticipation, a promise that the connection between him and Swirl might lead them both toward a future filled with possibility, passion, and perhaps even a legacy of their own. John folded the flyer carefully and slipped it into his pocket, his jaw setting with a quiet determination. "All right, Swirl," he murmured softly, "let's see what we've got." The next morning, John called his friend Ethan. "I'm in," he said simply, and Ethan's cheerful whoop on the other end of the line filled him with both nerves and excitement. Although John wasn't entirely sure what he was signing up for, he felt certain he wouldn't be alone. He had Swirl by his side, and perhaps together they were meant for something bigger than he'd ever imagined. That same day, the Mill Creek race proved to be a far cry from the small-town competition John had won weeks ago. The race grounds were packed with polished trailers and teams of seasoned riders who moved with the confidence of experience. Standing near Swirl, with his calloused hands resting on the lead rope, John surveyed the competition. His stomach churned as he realized he felt completely out of place among the skilled riders. Yet Swirl, her dark chestnut coat gleaming under the late morning sun, remained unfazed. John ran his hand over her neck and whispered, "You've got this," even though the words felt almost hollow against the roar of the starting gate and the cacophony of snorting horses and cheering spectators. John mounted Swirl with all the care he could muster, his focus entirely on guiding her through the chaotic opening laps. From the sidelines, Ethan offered a thumbs up and shouted encouraging words that John could barely catch over the pounding in his chest. Despite his best efforts, the pack quickly swallowed them. John's inexperience became painfully clear as sleek, practiced riders cut him off at every turn. When they finally crossed the finish line, John and Swirl came in dead last. Dismounting with trembling hands, John led Swirl back to the trailer, his face burning with humiliation and a growing sense of doubt. "What was I thinking?" he muttered, the weight of disappointment pressing down on him as he stared out at the fading light. Back at the farm that evening, John sat on the porch with a beer in hand, lost in thought while Swirl grazed quietly nearby. The soft twilight and gentle sounds of the farm provided little comfort as doubt crept into his mind. "Maybe Swirl isn't as special as I believed," he whispered to himself. But before his doubts could overwhelm him, Ethan arrived the next morning. His boots crunched on the gravel as he greeted John at the barn, where John was carefully brushing Swirl with slow, deliberate strokes. The usual ease in John's expression was replaced by quiet frustration. Leaning against the stall door, Ethan asked, "Tough day yesterday, huh?" John didn't immediately look up, his mind still wrestling with disappointment. After a brief silence, Ethan crossed his arms and asked, "So, what's next?" John finally set down the brush and faced his friend. "I'm done with racing," he said firmly. "I'm not a racer. Swirl isn't some champion horse built for competition." Ethan's gaze remained steady. "You don't really believe that, do you?" he countered gently. John scoffed. "Don't I look at what happened? Dead last? I'm out of my league." But Ethan stepped closer, his voice calm and resolute. "Remember what your granddad used to say about horses with swirls? He believed in something special. You brought her home because you saw that in her. Maybe you've just been too afraid to give her, and yourself, a real chance." John's eyes lingered on Swirl, who continued to graze with her coat shimmering in the soft morning light. A spark of something, hope, determination, or perhaps a hint of destiny, flickered in her dark, steady eyes. "What are you suggesting?" John asked quietly. Ethan grinned and said, "Maybe it's time to get some real training, a trainer who can teach you both what it takes to succeed." Although the idea of hiring a trainer made John's stomach twist with both apprehension and excitement, he couldn't ignore the growing conviction in Ethan's tone. Within a week, Ethan arranged for a seasoned horseman named Dave Turner to visit the farm. Dave, with sharp blue eyes and years of racing experience, arrived with an air of quiet authority. "Ethan told me you've got a horse with potential," Dave said as he studied Swirl with a long, thoughtful gaze. "She's got the look, but we need to see what she can do." Over the following weeks, grueling training sessions began. Dave pushed John to learn proper riding techniques, correct posture, and how to truly connect with Swirl. There were moments when John felt overwhelmed, tempted to quit under the strain, yet each time he looked into Swirl's steady eyes, he was reminded of the legacy his grandfather once spoke of, a legacy marked by that mystical Swirl. Slowly but surely, their routine began to transform. The early mornings in the barn, filled with the sound of John's determined voice and the soft nicker of Swirl, started to replace the old monotonous rhythms of farm life. John began to notice small victories, a smoother stride here, a more responsive turn there. Even though a single race might not change everything overnight, the progress was undeniable. And as they trained together, John's doubts gave way to a burgeoning belief that perhaps he was capable of more than he'd ever imagined. In a turning point at a regional championship, the stakes were higher and the competition fiercer. John's heart pounded as he adjusted his grip on the reins and glanced at Ethan, who offered a reassuring thumbs up. With Dave's steady guidance, John and Swirl surged forward as the race began. Every stride, every turn, was a test of their growing coordination and trust. They didn't win the race, but they finished strong. Second place at a regional event felt monumental compared to their earlier failures. As the race concluded and John dismounted, his hands trembling from a mix of exhaustion and pride, he gently patted Swirl's neck. "You've been carrying me all along," he murmured, a quiet smile breaking through as he acknowledged not only her strength but his own newfound resilience. Even as Ethan teased him about future possibilities and the promise of more challenging races, John's mind echoed with his grandfather's long-forgotten words and the undeniable magic of the Swirl. For the first time in a long while, John felt that he and Swirl were not just drifting through life as a farmer and an ordinary horse, but were on the brink of something truly extraordinary. Every stride was measured and efficient as John guided Swirl through the course. Standing by the rail with his arms crossed, Dave Turner watched intently, his sharp blue eyes assessing every move. When John pulled Swirl to a stop at the edge of a challenging turn, Dave stepped forward and said in a firm yet encouraging tone, "Don't let anyone shake your focus, John. Keep your eyes on Swirl. She's got the heart to outpace the competition if you stay sharp." John's jaw tightened as he nodded, murmuring, "I'll do my best." Dave added, "Do more than try, ride with conviction." The starting gate loomed ahead, its metal frames gleaming under the midday sun, and John felt the weight of the moment settle over him. He mounted Swirl carefully, adjusting his grip on the reins until he felt a steady connection between his hands and the horse's strength. As the crowd's roar grew louder and the energy in the air thrummed with anticipation, a rival rider, Ryan, appeared in the next lane. His smirk was visible even from a distance, a silent challenge thrown across the track. When the bell finally rang, all the horses surged forward. John leaned low over Swirl's neck, his focus razor-sharp, as they charged down the straightaway. Although Ryan's horse shot ahead with long, powerful strides, John trusted Swirl to ride with him rather than against him. The turns were tight and the competition fierce. Amid the chaos, experienced riders maneuvered their horses with practiced precision, their well-trained animals brushing close by. Yet, as John and Swirl navigated every bend, the rhythm they had forged in training began to shine through. In the final stretch, with the race reduced to a neck-and-neck battle between John and Ryan, the thunder of hooves and the roar of the crowd seemed to merge into a single, overwhelming pulse of determination. "Come on, girl," John urged, his voice barely audible over the wind as he coaxed Swirl to surge forward. With a powerful burst in the last few yards, Swirl propelled them past Ryan, crossing the finish line in second place. For John, the achievement was monumental, every heartbeat and every ounce of effort culminating in a finish that defied his earlier failures. As the crowd erupted in cheers, John dismounted, his legs trembling with a mix of exhaustion and pride. Dave clapped him on the shoulder, his eyes shining with approval. "Well done, John. That was one hell of a race." Ethan, ever the supportive friend, joined in with a wide grin. "You did it, man. You showed everyone what you and Swirl are made of." John looked down at Swirl, his hand brushing the distinctive swirl on her hip, and murmured softly, "It wasn't me. It was her." Swirl nickered gently, her breath forming soft clouds in the cool air. Later that evening, John sat on the porch with a beer in hand as the adrenaline of the race slowly faded. Swirl grazed quietly in the paddock, her chestnut coat glowing in the fading light. The memory of the race, with its moments of both triumph and near disaster, lingered in John's thoughts. "Grandad was right," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "she's special." Ethan's earlier encouragement echoed in his mind, and despite the nerves and setbacks, John felt a growing sense of purpose. The next day brought a turning point. An invitation arrived on a crisp fall morning, a formal letter from the National Equestrian League congratulating John on his recent performance and inviting him to compete in the prestigious Western National Championship. As John tore open the envelope, his heart quickened. This was validation of all the hard work he and Swirl had put in. The invitation, while thrilling, also filled him with trepidation. This wasn't a local race, it was the big leagues, where seasoned riders, professional teams, and sponsorships reigned supreme. John folded the letter carefully, his mind swirling with a mix of pride, doubt, and excitement. He walked to the paddock where Swirl stood grazing under the morning light. "What do you think, girl?" he murmured softly. Swirl flicked her ears in response, her eyes steady and calm. In that silent exchange, John realized that despite his fears, he couldn't let this opportunity slip away. With renewed determination, he resolved that if he was going to compete, he would do it right. Before embarking on this new challenge, John called Dave, the first person he trusted with his future as a rider. Dave's calm, reassuring voice bolstered John's resolve. "You've come a long way from where you started, John. This isn't about proving anything to anyone else. It's about showing yourself what you and Swirl can do." Ethan, always the encourager, reiterated his support. "You've got the instinct. Don't let fear hold you back." With those words echoing in his heart, John felt that despite the daunting prospect of the championship, he and Swirl were ready to take on the challenge. In that moment, as he led Swirl back to the barn under a sky tinged with the first hints of dawn, John realized that every setback, every lesson learned on the track, had led him to this turning point. He wasn't just a farmer anymore. He was a rider, and with Swirl by his side, he was ready to chase a destiny he had never dared to imagine. As night fell over the farm, John's voice carried softly into the quiet darkness. "She's special, and maybe I am too," he murmured, a mix of wonder and resolve in his tone. The championship was over, but its impact lingered long after the final race. John's name, once just another in a sea of competitors, had begun to echo through equestrian circles. Articles spoke of the underdog farmer and his extraordinary horse, Swirl, with her mysterious swirl marking a legacy of hope and perseverance. In the weeks that followed, things started to change. A local equestrian supply company offered to sponsor Swirl, providing new tack and gear in exchange for representing their brand. At first, John hesitated. The idea of sponsorship felt both foreign and overwhelming, but Dave Turner's steady encouragement reminded him, "It's not just about money, John. It's about building connections. You and Swirl have something special." Despite his lingering doubts, John couldn't ignore that deep stirring inside him. With each passing day, invitations to compete in higher-profile events began to arrive. Professional races, media interviews, and local reporters calling him the farmer with the golden horse transformed his once quiet world. Yet amidst the newfound accolades and responsibilities, John remained grounded. Every morning, he would return to the barn where Swirl waited, her dark chestnut coat catching the first rays of dawn. He would gently stroke her neck and whisper, "You're still the same, Swirl." In those intimate moments, the weight of the races and the growing reputation faded into something much deeper, a legacy built on trust, resilience, and the quiet lessons his grandfather had once shared. One crisp evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, John sat on the porch with Ethan and Dave. Laughter and shared memories filled the air while a scrapbook of clippings and photos recounted their journey, from humble beginnings to regional triumphs. "You've come a long way, John," Ethan said with admiration. "Remember, it's not about the trophies. It's about proving to yourself what you and Swirl can do." John's eyes lingered on Swirl, who grazed serenely in the paddock. The faint glow of the setting sun highlighted the swirl on her hip, a symbol of all they had overcome. "Granddad was right," John whispered, his voice soft but certain. "She's special. And maybe, just maybe, I am too." As the evening deepened and stars began to sparkle overhead, John stood by the paddock with Swirl at his side, feeling the quiet promise of a future filled with possibility. He knew that their journey was far from over, that each race, each setback, and every small victory had been steps toward a life he had never dared imagine. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. If you've enjoyed the story of John and Swirl, please subscribe to Thunder Hoofbeats for more captivating stories of hope, perseverance, and transformation. Hit the subscribe button now and stay tuned. There's always another chapter waiting to unfold.